All right, deep divers, welcome. Today we're really digging into the heart itself, how it's built, how it works, and basically how it keeps us going minute by minute. We've pulled together the essential stuff from key medical sources. Think of this as your fast track to really getting this vital organ.
Absolutely. And it's so important to grasp that the heart isn't, just a simple pump. It's way more complex than that. It's a really sophisticated, self-regulating system. A marvel, really. By the end of this, you'll have a solid grasp on concepts usually buried in thick textbooks, but we're making it accessible, cutting through the jargon for you.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. The architecture, how's it laid out? If you picture it, it's basically got four chambers, right atrium, left atrium up top, they receive the blood.
The receiving rooms.
Exactly. And below them, the right ventricle and left ventricle. They do the pumping out part. Now, these chambers connect to some major blood vessels, big highways for blood. You've got the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava bringing blood back into the right atrium.
The oxygenated blood, right.
From the body. Correct. Then the pulmonary artery takes that deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle off to the lungs. And the aorta, that's the big one, carries the fresh oxygenated blood from the left ventricle out to, well, everywhere else in your body.
And don't forget the pulmonary veins.
Right. Can't forget those. They bring that oxygen-rich blood back from the lungs into the left atrium.
Yeah.
And to keep all this flowing one way, there are four crucial valves, like one-way doors.
Yeah, traffic control.
You got it. The pulmonary valve, aortic valve, tricuspid valve, and the mitral valve. They open and shut, keeping everything moving in the right direction. Perfectly timed.
And what's really interesting anatomy-wise is how it actually sits in your chest. You might think it's right in the middle, perfectly centered, but the right ventricle, it actually sits more anteriorly, closer to your chest wall.
Oh, interesting. So towards the front.
Exactly. And the left atrium is kind of tucked away more posteriorly towards your back. And this isn't just random trivia. That orientation, it's super important for doctors listening to heart sounds or looking at scans. It matters for how it interacts with everything around it.
That spatial thing really makes sense. Practical design. And speaking of design, this muscle is working nonstop. It needs its own fuel, right? It can't just run on fumes.
Precisely. It's pumping blood everywhere else, but it needs its own dedicated supply.
So let's talk coronary arteries, the heart's own plumbing. These arteries branch right off the aorta, feeding the heart muscle itself. And once that blood's used up by the heart muscle, it drains back through something called the coronary sinus, which dumps right back into the right atrium, ready for another trip to the lungs.
Okay, so diving into those coronaries, there's this concept called dominance. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty straightforward. About 90% of people are right dominant. That just means their right coronary artery, the RCA, supplies a key vessel called the posterior descending artery, or PDA.
Okay, and what does that PDA do? Why is it key?
Good question. The PDA supplies the bottom part of the heart, the inferior wall, and the lower part of the wall between the ventricles, the inferior septum, crucial areas.
Got it. So 90% right dominant. What about the other 10%?
They're left dominant. Their left circumflex artery, the LCX, is the one that supplies the PDA instead of the RCA.
Okay, so the main players in the coronary world are the RCA, the left anterior descending, or LAD.
Sometimes called the widowmaker, unfortunately, because blockages there can be so serious.
Right. Then the left main, which splits into the LAD, and the LCX, the left circumflex.
Exactly. And each of these arteries covers a specific territory, like zones on a map. The LAD, that takes care of the front wall, the front part of the septum, and the very tip, the apex of the heart.
Makes sense. Anterior descending.
Right. The LCX handles the side wall, the lateral wall, and the PDA, which usually comes off the RCA, remember, that covers the inferior wall and inferior septum, the bottom bits.
Knowing those territories must be critical if someone's having a heart attack.
Absolutely critical. If someone has symptoms suggesting, say, an anterior heart attack, we immediately think LAD blockage. It helps pinpoint the problem fast. It's like knowing the city's power grid. And clinically, this is really important. Blockages happen most often in the LAD, then the RCA, then the LCX. That order matters.
Wow. Okay. LAD is the most common spot for trouble.
Yeah.
Now, let's zoom in on something you mentioned, a vulnerability related to the mitral valve, right?
Yes, this is fascinating and, frankly, a bit scary from a design perspective.
The mitral valve, controlling flow from left atrium to left ventricle, is held in place by these little muscles, papillary muscles.
Two of them. Anterolateral, AL, and posteromedial, PM.
Okay, AL and PM. But here's the kicker, right? Their blood supply isn't the same.
Exactly. The AL papillary muscle, it gets blood from two arteries, usually branches from both the LAD and the LCX. It has a backup.
Dual supply. Makes sense for redundancy.
But the PM papillary muscle, it usually only gets blood from one source.
Just one. Which one?
Typically the RCA if you're right dominant or the LCX if you're left dominant. But only one main supply line, no backup.
And that single supply. That sounds risky.
It absolutely is. That's the crucial point. Think about an inferior heart attack, often caused by an RCA blockage. If that blockage cuts off blood flow, that posteromedial papillary muscle is incredibly vulnerable because it lacks that backup supply the AL muscle has.
So it can get damaged easily.
It can rupture. And if that PM muscle ruptures, the mitral valve can't close properly anymore. You get severe mitral regurgitation, blood flowing backward into the left atrium instead of forward.
Which sounds bad.
It's catastrophic. It leads to acute heart failure, a sudden life-threatening emergency, all because of that one small anatomical detail, a single blood supply. It shows why knowing this anatomy is so vital.
That is incredibly impactful. A
Yeah.
tiny detail with huge consequences. Okay, so we've covered the structure, the chambers, the valves, the pipes, even the heart's own fuel lines and its weak spots. What about the wiring, the electrical system?
Ah, yes. The cardiac electrical system. This is what makes the heart beat rhythmically. It's the coordination system.
So the key players here.
You start with the SA node, the sinoatrial node. That's the main pacemaker. Sets the basic rhythm
Where does that live?
in the wall of the right atrium. Then the signal travels to the AV node, the atrioventricular node.
Okay, AV node, location.
That sits down in the septum between the atria, the intraatrial septum. It causes a slight delay, which is important for timing.
Little pause.
Yeah.
Then where?
From the AV node, the signal goes down the bundle of His, located in the wall between the ventricles, the interventricular septum. Then it splits into the right bundle branch and the left bundle branch, heading down towards the bottom of the ventricles.
Like wires spreading out.
Exactly. And finally, into the Purkinje fibers, which spread the signal rapidly throughout the ventricle walls, causing them to contract forcefully and pump blood out.
A whole coordinated sequence for every single beat. Amazing.
And connecting back to our coronary arteries, remember the RCA?
Yeah, the right coronary artery supplies the bottom of the heart, usually.
Well, in most people, the RCA also supplies blood to both the SA node and the AV node.
Oh, so a blockage in the RCA?
Could not only cause an inferior heart attack, potentially damaging that vulnerable PM papillary muscle we talked about, but it could also knock out the heart's main pacemakers, leading to serious rhythm problems like heart block.
Wow. So it's all interconnected, the plumbing, the structure, the wiring. Trouble in one area can absolutely affect another.
Precisely. It's a tightly integrated system.
Okay, this is fantastic. We've laid out the blueprint. Now let's shift gears slightly and talk about how it works in action. Cardiac physiology. We need to understand how it pumps and what affects its performance, right?
Exactly. Time to talk function.
Let's start with some basic volumes. You hear these terms thrown around. EDV and ESV.
Right. EDV is end diastolic volume. Diastole is the relaxation or filling phase. So EEV is the amount of blood in the ventricle right at the end of filling, just before it starts to squeeze. Max volume.
Okay, full tank. And ESV.
And systolic volume. Systole is the contraction or pumping phase. So ESV is the little bit of blood left in the ventricle right after it finishes squeezing. It doesn't pump out everything.
Got it. EDV is full. ESV is what's left after the pump. So using those two, we can figure out some really key things about how well the heart's working.
Definitely. First up is stroke volume, or SV.
That's just the amount pumped out in one beat, right?
Exactly. It's simply EDV minus ESV, the volume ejected per beat.
Okay, makes sense. Then there's ejection fraction, EF. This one sounds important.
It is very important clinically. EF is the stroke volume divided by the end diastolic volume. So it's the fraction or percentage of blood that was in the ventricle that actually got pumped out.
Ah, so it's a measure of efficiency, like how good a squeeze did the heart manage.
Perfect way to put it. A normal EF is usually above 50–55%. A low EF tells you the heart muscle isn't pumping effectively. It's a key indicator of heart failure severity.
Okay, EF is efficiency. What about cardiac output, Shiva?
Cardiac output is the total amount of blood pumped by the heart per minute. It's simply your stroke volume times your heart rate. How much per beat times how many beats per minute.
And that's crucial because our body's needs change, right? Like during exercise.
Absolutely. Your CR curve has to increase to deliver more oxygen when demands go up. It's a really, really important physiological number. Your body constantly adjusts it.
Then there's venous return, VR.
Venous return is just the amount of blood flowing back to the heart from the veins each minute. Ideally, over time, venous return should equal cardiac output. What goes out must come back in for the system to work.
Makes sense, a closed loop. And one more term? TPR.
Total peripheral resistance. This is basically the resistance the heart has to pump against out in the body's blood vessels. Think of it like the friction or tightness in the pipes downstream.
So if vessels tighten up, vasoconstriction.
TPR goes up, harder to pump.
And if they relax, vasodilation.
TPR goes down, easier to pump.
Okay, those terms set the stage nicely.
And we can quickly link these to blood pressure numbers too. Your systolic blood pressure, SBP, the top number, that's mainly determined by your stroke volume, how much blood is forcefully ejected.
Higher stroke volume generally means higher systolic pressure.
Correct. And the diastolic blood pressure, DBP, the bottom number, that's largely set by your total peripheral resistance, how much pressure remains in the arteries when the heart is relaxing, which depends on how constricted the vessels are.
Okay, SBP linked to SV, DBP linked to TPR. Makes sense.
Then pulse pressure, PP, is just SBP minus DBP. And interestingly, pulse pressure is pretty directly proportional to stroke volume. A bigger stroke volume tends to widen the pulse pressure.
And finally, MAP, arterial pressure.
Right. MAP is the average pressure in your arteries across the whole cardiac cycle. It's considered a good indicator of how well organs are being perfused with blood. You can estimate it. It's roughly DBP plus 1/3 of the pulse pressure, SBP minus DBP.
So over 120 over 80.
It'd be 80 plus 1/3 at 120 minus 80, which is 80 plus 1/3 of 40. So 80 plus about 13.3 gives you MMAP around 93.3.
Got it. That calculation makes sense. All right, with all that groundwork laid, let's hit the big four. The main factors that really determine cardiac output. The levers the body uses.
The determinants of cardiac performance: preload, afterload, contractility, and heart rate.
Let's tackle preloads first. You mentioned it a bit with EDV.
Exactly. Preload is essentially the amount of stretch on the heart muscle fibers right before they contract. Think of it as how much the left ventricle gets filled up, how much it's loaded before the squeeze. That EDV we talked about is a direct measure of preload volume.
Like stretching a rubber band before you let it snap.
Perfect analogy. More stretch, up to a point, gives you a more forceful snap or contraction. So generally, more preload means a bigger stroke volume and higher cardiac output.
But there's a downside.
More stretch, more filling means the heart has to work harder. It requires more oxygen. Think of lifting a heavier weight.
Okay, so how can the body increase preload?
Several ways. Giving volume, like IV fluids or a blood transfusion, directly increases it. Slowing the heart rate down actually increases preload because it gives the ventricles more time to fill between beats. And a really key one, constricting the veins. Your veins hold a huge amount of blood volume. When they constrict, often due to sympathetic nerve signals acting on alpha-1 receptors, it squeezes that venous blood back towards the heart, increasing filling. This is vital if you lose blood.
So squeezing veins pushes blood back to the heart. Clever.
Yeah.
How do we decrease preload then?
Opposite mechanisms, really. Losing volume, bleeding, dehydration. Speeding the heart rate up too much reduces filling time, and causing blood to pool in the veins, like with certain medications.
Ah, like nitrates for angina, chest pain.
Exactly. Nitrates work primarily by dilating veins. This causes blood to pool slightly in the periphery, reducing the amount returning to the heart, reducing preload. Less preload means less work for the heart, less oxygen demand, which relieves the angina pain. It's a direct application of this concept.
That makes perfect sense. And doctors measure this how? You mentioned LVEDV.
Right. LVEDV is left ventricular end diastolic volume, the actual amount of blood. LVEDP is left ventricular end diastolic pressure, the pressure generated by that filling. Both give us a clinical handle on preload.
Okay, preload is the stretch before the squeeze. What about afterload?
Afterload is the force or resistance the left ventricle has to overcome during the squeeze to actually push blood out into the aorta.
So it's the resistance after the heart in the circulation.
Precisely. The heart has to generate enough pressure inside the ventricle to physically push open the aortic valve and then eject blood against the pressure already existing in the aorta and the resistance in the peripheral vessels, that TPR we mentioned.
What kinds of things make that job harder? Increase the afterload.
The big one is high blood pressure, or hypertension. If the pressure in the aorta is already high, the ventricle has to work much harder to overcome it.
Okay, high BP. What else?
A stiff, narrowed aortic valve, aortic stenosis. The doorway out is smaller, harder to push through, big increase in afterload. Also, conditions that physically obstruct the outflow path, like hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, HCM, where the heart muscle itself gets too thick and can block the exit, or sometimes a thin membrane below the aortic valve.
So basically, high pressure or a physical blockage.
Those are the main ways afterload increases. You raise the mean arterial pressure or you obstruct the outflow tract.
And decreasing afterload.
Lowering blood pressure, for instance, with medications, or surgically fixing a bad aortic valve, or removing an obstruction like an HCM.
And the principle here is the same as preload in terms of work.
Yes, higher afterload means the heart has to work harder, generate more tension, and therefore consumes more oxygen. If afterload stays high chronically, like with untreated hypertension, the heart muscle thickens initially to cope. That's hypertrophy. But eventually, that can lead to problems like stiffness, poor relaxation, and ultimately heart failure. The muscle just gets worn out fighting that resistance.
Preload and afterload. Got it.
hmm
Stretch before, resistance during. Both affect how hard the heart works. Wow. What an incredible journey today. We really went from the ground up, didn't we? From the heart's detailed anatomy chambers, vessels, that critical coronary supply, right through to its physiology in action, preload, afterload, all those key terms. You listening should now have a really solid foundation for understanding this amazing organ. It's not just a pump, it's so much more.
Absolutely. And maybe final thought to leave you with, reflect on that detail about the posteromedial papillary muscle having just one blood supply. How does knowing that single point of vulnerability change how you think about seemingly small details in biology? Are there other hidden single points of failure like that in our bodies, where one small issue can cascade into major problems? It really highlights the incredible complexity and sometimes fragility of our biological systems. Keep exploring that interconnectedness.